Good.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're already live.
All
Hi
good.
everyone. This is Anna, and I'm from Mars X, and here with me is Charlie Ward, a person that everyone seems to know, really. Everybody I told, Charlie Ward is coming to the podcast. Everyone was so happy that you're going to be here. So this is great to have you. Charlie is a founder of amazing Ramen Club, and he's going to talk today about the power of community and how to help founders reach ramen profitability through community. And disregard my last post. I wrote something horrible about ramen profitability as a joke. But Charlie, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on?
Hi, everyone. My name's Charlie Ward. I'm a London-based community builder. I actually run two communities now. So one is called Ramen Club, and it's a paid community which is online on Slack, and also in person, currently in London, where we bring founders together, mainly bootstrap founders, to help each other reach ramen profitability and beyond that. Ramen profitability just means the minimum revenue your startup makes for you to survive off, eating cheap ramen noodles. You don't literally have to eat cheap ramen noodles, but it's kind of a figure of speech. But it's about the freedom that gives you, where you don't need to rely on a job or outside investors. So it's kind of quite a powerful idea. And the way that we help people with that is like we have in-house mentors with things like design, finance, research, that sort of thing, to kind of help answer people's questions. Obviously, other community members are very, very helpful to each other to kind of give each hard-won lessons learned. And yeah, all sorts of other things like we have lots of discounts and all sorts of services and that kind of thing. And the in-person co-working is it's a good way to kind of build relationships and bring connection to people. The other community that I run is actually a free version of this called Indie London, and that basically is a Slack, a newsletter, and a monthly meetup at a pub where founders get together, help each other, meet each other, share stories, that kind of thing. So a lot of people, when they go into entrepreneurship, especially as bootstrappers, it's quite a lonely endeavor. Like they often don't know any other founders in their network. So the first network they build of founders is usually through us in our communities, kind of thing. So that's kind of what we do at the moment, and yeah, looking to do much more of that in the future.
Awesome. And, I love how you're also bringing something a bit less official, a bit less work related. So like meeting in a pub. And, we talked with Sarah Osterholzer from Good Business Club. And she said that, from time to time, the best offers and like the best partnerships and collaborations actually come from something like that, like meeting in a pub or just letting go. So that's amazing. And how did you come to this? Like, what was your path to it? Because I know that you're also working in, correct me if I'm wrong, UX, or
Yeah,
am
yeah,
I?
UX
I
research. Yeah.
tend to mix those up. So yeah, you have your desk job, or maybe you had it, if that's gone already. So what brought you to, to building a community?
Yeah, so I still do a little bit of freelancing 2 days a week, UX research stuff, but I'm like over time I've been kind of slowly reducing the number of days, kind of thing. But my backstory is I originally started actually advertising agencies, creative agencies in London, creating things like digital campaigns, like TV ads for like, kind of big brands, that kind of thing. And I was in like account handling or client services, which is like not a common path to start doing community building, to be honest. But like after 6 years doing that, I decided I wanted to have a bit of a change. So I wanted to go into the tech industry as a product manager, which I did. And while I was doing that, I basically stumbled across Product Hunt, just seeing like all the cool things people were building and shipping. And I realized it was kind of like that, which made me realize, oh, like, people are building really cool stuff. And it's not all like big venture backs like billion-dollar businesses. There's like all this other like interesting stuff in the maker community. So like the product hunt was a bit of a gateway drug to all this stuff for me. And it's there that I came across Indie Hackers, where it's kind of like a more focused sort of community where it's more about building online businesses to support yourself without funding, whereas Product Hunt is a bit broader. It's not just like businesses necessarily. Right. And it leans, Indie Hackers says, traditionally leans towards SaaS, but like now it's kind of a bit more open. There's people doing all sorts of stuff on there. And that's when I was like, oh, this is like really cool. I want to like get involved in this. And very organically, I just, in a conversation with some other people on Indie Hackers, ended up saying, oh, why don't like the 5 of us get together and have some drinks in London, and I called it Indie Beers. So that's kind of how I originally got into it. And that was like about 4 years ago or something like that now. And yeah, since then, I just sort of kept doing it and kept evolving from there.
Okay, that sounds amazing. And yeah, obviously this is one thing, talk about it on the internet, and a bit of a different to actually bring it to life and validate the idea and eventually monetize it. So what was your journey there? So did you guys actually meet? And when did it start being less of a time to time gig to a business?
Yeah, it was all very organic all the way through, to be honest. Like I started it it started with Indie Beers originally, and it was just a monthly pub meetup in London where we'd go, Indie Hackers would go and share what they're working on, have a couple of drinks. It was very chilled. But no one actually showed up to the first one originally. I didn't organize it very well. So the link I sent out like was a broken link. And one person came, but he left before I got there. So I showed up and I was on my own. But I managed to persuade him to come back. So he went home and he came back from his house to the meetup.
Okay.
And this was a friend of mine called Matt Overton. And this was the first indie hacker I ever met in real life. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. This guy knows all the same. He knows about all these things like Product Hunt and Indie Hackers. And he was the first person I met in real life who knew what any of this stuff was. So that was just really cool. And then after that, I decided, okay, let's be a bit more organized. And it started to grow a bit after that. But if he hadn't come back, I may have never done it again, honestly. So like, shout out to Matt. Because, yeah, I may have just done something completely different if he hadn't come back. Anyway.
Right.
But yeah, to answer your question, I was doing the Indie Beers meetups like for 6 to 8 months, and people started saying, oh, we like the meetups, like the beers, but like we kind of want to start like actually co-working or like building stuff with some of the other people here, because there's lots of people working on kind of interesting stuff, right? So I was like, okay, cool. So I started planning maybe like a kind of co-working subscription, like for a couple of Saturdays a month, which turned out to be eventually Ramen Club. So I kind of was working on something else at the time. It was like a marketplace idea, which I'm glad I didn't do now. But like, I was just like, I really enjoy this community kind of stuff. Why don't I just lean into this and see if you can make something of this, some kind of business sort of thing? Because I really enjoyed it, and there was clearly value there, people asking me for it. So I was like, why not just try it out? So yeah, but in the end, so this was now 3 years ago, end of 2019, I started what became Ramen Club. So this is where we'd meet up on Saturdays twice a month, and people paid $25 a month to join. And we had a little Slack and that kind of thing. That's kind of where it all started. So it was all very organic, and yeah, I realized I enjoyed it, and I just kept going really. So it's been like 3 years now since I started that, and yeah, it's kind of evolved a lot over time, but I think it's gone from strength to strength.
Right. No, it's yeah, I love that it's very organic, and that you never rushed it into monetization, right? So people kind of asked you to do that, which is very unusual. And basically that's where the validation came from, right? So and it's funny that you mentioned, this person being the first one who actually knew what indie hackers are. And I think to this day, a lot of people are actually not aware of a lot of the slang that's going on, when we call them indie hackers. Not everyone understands what this is about, like what bootstrapping, like even the developers, right, who end up helping those founders not really are not really familiar with the lingo. So did you have to, I don't know, somehow introduce it, or how was this part?
So by the way, for anyone watching who doesn't know what these things mean, Indie Hackers is a website, community, and podcast. All it means is like founders who are building usually tech products without funding. It's quite a broad thing now. It used to be a bit more focused. But to be honest, with the people that used to come to these meetups, it didn't take much explaining, because like I was kind of quite focused on this particular niche. So like, for example, I would advertise the meetups on the Indie Hackers website itself, like because they've got a meetup list there, and on my Twitter and our newsletter and that kind of thing. So people who kind of stumbled across it sort of were already like immersed in that world. So it usually didn't take too much. I actually find that's happening a little bit more now, weirdly, a few years later, because so Indie London, which is like, Indie Beers is one of the meetups that we now do for Indie London. So we've kind of broken over this like threshold where people are now trying to join who are not from the indie hackers world. It's more like people from the broader tech community have started becoming interested because they've heard about it somewhere. And so now there's a bit more of that, people joining who maybe haven't actually heard of indie hackers before, but they've heard of Indie London. Right. So now there's maybe a little bit of that more educational stuff happening. It doesn't happen like all the time, I wouldn't say, but yeah, it's a movement where like it's hard for me to, I don't know how many people actually identify as indie hackers. I just assume it's maybe only in the tens of thousands or something around the world, but it's a small, like very like active, tight-knit sort of community of the tech space.
Yeah, I mean, myself, honestly, I learned about the whole term and like how amazing and supportive the community is not so long ago. But it's just great to see how everyone basically supports each other and tends to buy from each other. So yeah, I totally understand how it could have grown organically in your case. But I also remember that you pivoted, right? You went from the Weekend Club to Ramen Club. So why did this happen? And did you have any problems with that? Because a lot of founders tend to be very, very skeptical about pivoting, right? This is a very crucial and very nerve-wracking moment. So what made you do it?
Yeah, I think there were a few reasons. So, I only actually decided like earlier this year, at the start of this year, that I was going to change the name, about like around 2 years in or something like that, 2.5 years in. And that's because originally we were called Weekend Club because we actually only did stuff on the weekend, on Saturdays, and the idea was for people who have full-time jobs and don't have time to co-work with founders. So that was the original reason. Then during COVID, we went fully online, and then we realized like a lot of our members were like now full-time on their projects, so they weren't really, or they had kids and they weren't really looking to do stuff on Saturdays anymore. So we started doing stuff throughout the week, so stuff for full-time and part-time founders. Those are the two main sort of groups of members. And so I realized like Weekend Club was like a bit not quite relevant anymore. But also I found out that some people were not joining because they thought we only did stuff on the weekend still. So like just the name was preventing us from growing.
Oh, interesting.
And I think there's actually more reasons than that. So other reasons is I wanted to, my background in advertising and branding, I wanted to work on the brand identity a bit more for what was at the time Weekend Club. And I was just really struggling to think of like, what does a weekend like visually look like in the context of what our community is about? I was just really, it's quite like an abstract thing, and I was just kind of like, I couldn't really, nothing was really like, inspiring me there. and then I don't know how I came. I literally cannot remember how I decided on ramen, but like I suddenly started thinking about ramen profitability, and I realized that's kind of what a lot of our members were trying to get to. It was like a coherent goal that united everyone. But also, I liked the fact that like ramen is, as a brand is like there's a lot you can do with that,
Yeah.
like visually, and it's very playful, and there's a lot you can do with it. So I was like, okay, let's make it more about that. But you know, it was just I think it was at a meetup that I was explaining the new concepts, but it was still cool. This is the thing, it was still called Weekend Club, but the whole thing was with a ramen logo and about
Right.
ramen profitability. And someone was like, hang on, why don't you just call it Ramen Club if it's all about ramen now? Like, why are you still
Right.
calling it Weekend? I was like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I then only then when someone like said, what are you doing? That I decided to fully change it to Ramen Club, which happened in May this year. But
Cool.
yeah, I was a bit. I mean, I was a bit. You're a bit apprehensive when you're changing the name and the brand of stuff. But I just took a quite methodical approach. I got like buy-in from our community first. I explained like why and what it was, and spoke to a lot of people, and they were on board. Then it was just about launching it with the new branding, new website, just making sure everything, like all the links works, like just all of the basics to make sure it
Right.
actually works when we relaunch. But there was like a very positive reception to it in the end. So I think it was the right thing to do, and yeah, I'm very happy that we made that
No, love
decision.
the name. I mean, love ramen and love the name. I think it's
Right.
amazing. And yeah, it's great that you were still giving the power to the community and like making sure that they are also on board with your decision. So I think that's really important in your case. But it's great that you mentioned, at some point going fully virtual, right? And before that, you also said that you had Slack, but now. And I went to the website. Again, looks amazing. And now you have a ton of content there. So, what is the content that keeps your community engaged the most? How do you choose the content that you present? Like, if you're going like with partnerships with some of the brands, how do you do that? So basically, can you tell us a little bit about like your growth strategy? This is something for me personally.
Yeah, on growth. I mean, on growth strategy. To be honest with you, like some mistakes I've made have been trying to focus on too many different channels at once, which I think makes a bit more sense when you've got more resources to kind of put into those things. But like
Right.
early on, so I've spoken to a lot of our members who kind of become the ones that become the most successful tend to focus on very few channels at the beginning, like one or two kind of thing. And I think that like I need to be a bit more decisive on like what I'm going to focus on, to be honest, because we've grown through a variety of things, like not just like word of mouth, but also Twitter, from Google search, from sponsorship, like sponsoring a podcast, Indie Bites, from Indie Hackers website itself, from Indie London, like a lot of people joined from that. And it's kind of like I feel like I'm sort of spreading myself too thin on all of these things. So my instinct recently actually is to perhaps focus a little bit more on Twitter, because that's where a lot of our audience is. And honestly, sometimes I treat Twitter a bit not professionally enough. Like I do it because I was on Twitter before I was using it for marketing. I was like, so I still kind of use it for fun. And like in some ways that's good, but in other ways it's like, there's a lot more I could do with it as a marketing channel, basically. So I think it makes the most sense to focus more on that. And there's all sorts of tools to help you do this, like,
Right.
writing threads, like finding really good, like viral tweets that you can reply to, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think I'm going to focus more on that. I think that partially answers your question. You're also
Yeah.
asking about how I choose the types of content, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. Because, this is a really important thing. And like you said, a lot of founders spread themselves too thin or just don't do anything basically because they don't know where to go because there are so many opportunities, and as usual, you tend to think that, hey, I need to be an expert to go at least somewhere, but you actually really don't have to be an expert in anything to just start doing it. All right. So yeah, it's great that you're sharing, and I think you're making the right decision. Twitter is weirdly coming back, or just never left. It's just me who missed it.
Yeah,
But
with our kind of general community, the sort of maker community, indie hacker community, everyone's on Twitter and active on Twitter. Yeah. So it doesn't make sense for every business, but for us, it actually does like make a lot of sense. But just to quickly answer your question on the content, so I mean, I just have a good understanding about what people sort of are interested in, and founders are mostly struggle with growth, finding an idea in the early stages, productivity, and like it's a lot of it's stuff related to those three things. But there's a lot of topics you can write about within those three subjects, sort of thing. And they also want to hear interviews and like success stories from like successful founders. So obviously there's lots more things, but like those are kind of a few pillars that like generally do quite well.
Right. And you have your own podcast as well, which is great. I think again, empowering founders to talk, to tell the full story is great.
Yeah, it's the thing though, it's like, I love doing the podcast, but again, it's just like it's a channel that maybe time-wise I can't afford to do yet, in terms of to do it like frequently enough and well enough. Right. We've got some good new episodes coming, and they're great, but I kind of wondering whether to like pause on some of these things for like 6 months until we kind of get to a stage where we can kind of invest in making all of these things the best they can possibly be. But this is just like a learning experience for me, sure. Sort of, because I haven't had a business at this stage yet. So yeah, it's all interesting lessons.
Right. And you're a solo founder, right?
Yes.
So again, how does that work? I mean, producing all these kinds of content, doing the meetups, doing the workshops, having a job.
Yeah.
How do you juggle that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a lot of context switching, and it's not always easy, I would say. But I think it's just learning to delegate. So like it's good to kind of work with your community members. Like we have community members that we pay to run some of our online events and some in-person events, for example. So I'm not physically running every single event that we have. We're starting to do guest posts as well, where our members write about a subject they know very well, and it's good for us because we're getting content. It's good for them because they're getting they want to do it, but they're also getting like backlinks to their website, and they're like building their profile online and right. That sort of thing. So yeah, it's just about trying to think of smart ways to like have better leverage over like what you want to do. You can also have a great VA, Lydia Melvin, who helps me with preparing things like newsletters. So yeah, it's just about, I try to like delegate stuff that like it doesn't need me to do it every time. So yeah, that's I haven't like cracked the code, I wouldn't say, but like that stuff makes it a lot easier.
Right. Okay. And you're also bootstrapping, and that's again a very interesting approach. And I think a lot of especially solo founders would like to do that, right? Because for a lot of startups, getting the investment is a success point, and this is slowly turning, right? And a lot more founders want to bootstrap. So what is your take on it? Why did you choose to bootstrap?
Yeah, well, I guess because I started in the sort of a community of bootstrappers, it just felt like the natural way to do it, I guess, because that's what everyone else was doing around me. But yeah, I was also just attracted to this kind of approach because the trade-off is maybe you don't go as fast, but you retain more control over what you do. I think there's nothing wrong with investment or being venture backed, but it's just like a slightly different path. Like
right.
You're optimizing for basically getting big really fast and trying to get as rich as possible, but the trade-off is the added stress and all the things that come with that. It's not that money is not without strings attached. So yeah, I like doing it this way, and it's not that I'm not against like ever trying to raise money necessarily, but the good thing is, like, if you get yourself to a position where you don't need investors, you can generally get better terms. So that's kind of why I think it's good for a lot of people. There are some types of businesses it's impossible to bootstrap. Like if you're starting a rocket company, like you kind of probably can't bootstrap that, right? Like unless you're already extremely wealthy. But I think it's just the right thing for who I am at this time, basically.
Right. Have you maybe ever thought about crowdfunding? I mean, you're backed by the entire community.
I mean, in a way we are, because our members pay us to run the community. So I guess we are kind of funded.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying though, like as in like raise a bunch of money and give us equity. Yeah. I mean, I haven't actually considered that, to be honest. We might one day. Yeah, I'll think about it.
Okay, that's good. But all right, I just want to also understand, like, what is your vision for the Ramen Club? Like, what's next? I don't want to say how do you see yourself in 5 years, but that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. Ultimately, there's a lot of friction to living off something you created, your own business, which doesn't necessarily need to be there. If people just have like, what I think is what we offer is like, if we have the best in class community content and tools for founders, then it should be it could be significantly easier to start a bootstrap business. I think a lot of people have the ability to do it, but they just lack those things: the community, the content, and the tools. So for some people, I think it like should be as easy as getting a job. Like it's just like, I think it should be a more an easier career path than it currently is, and I think it's possible to make it like 10x easier to survive off your bootstrap business. So what that means is creating world-class content focused at early stage bootstrap founders. We want to create really world-class tools to help them. So even just like a common thing that messes people up is like taxes. Like just creating like a really good tax calculator focused on founders, I think would be helpful, because I find that like people often just they basically never save enough, and I think it's because it's hard to actually get this knowledge, like what how much you should be saving. But obviously the number one thing is the community. So that's the online community, just making that like as great as possible. So there's all the people you need to support you, the systems in place for you to meet others and get feedback. And a big part of that actually is the in-person experiences, which I don't think anyone has done really well for bootstrap founders yet. So in like the venture-backed world, there was like Launch House, which I've tried to do something like this for like co-living houses. It's kind of burnt out. It's been a few scandals and that kind of thing. But I also think they raised more money than they could never fulfill that dream, I don't think. That you've seen like WeWork as well. They always preach the community stuff, which is the narrative which powered their huge like explosive growth. I think they had the right narrative, but like it's impossible to grow community at the speed and scale they were trying to, I think.
Right.
So we're going to want to take a bit of a slower approach and just make so in London we have like a weekly in-person co-working session just with founders, just with community members, and we want to bring that to cities around the world, because it's a format that's working really well. It's growing every week, and I don't see why this couldn't work in like every major city. So we want to have a presence in like basically with these co-working events for community members in every major city, and then part of the subscription is also this amazing content, amazing tools, basically. So there's probably a few things there, but I think the one liner is just we want to make it 10x easier to become a successful bootstrap founder through these things.
Oh, that's amazing. I love your mission. And I think you're right about taxes. We had one of the previous episodes with David Turney, who's one of the award-winning lawyers in the UK. And interestingly, that's one of our most popular sessions, because no one seems to know how to go about it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's really
it's crazy
terribly difficult.
because there's just, I mean, it's not just, what the founder owes like for their personal tax. It's like when you have international customers, how you're compliant with, dozens of different.
Okay, Charlie, you're breaking. Yeah, we were warned that that might happen. Hopefully Charlie's coming back. He's got, okay,
Hey,
there you go. Yeah.
you lose me for a second.
Yeah. There you are.
Sorry
No
about
worries.
that. Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying that, apart from your own personal tax liability for founders, it's hard to be compliant in every country you sell products, basically, because they've got each got their own rules, and the stuff is not really automated in any like elegant way at the moment. So it's a difficult subject.
Right. Did you figure it out for yourself? Was
Still
it
working it.
difficult?
Yeah, so to be honest, I think we're below the threshold of needing to pay lots of taxes in like most countries still, but it's something that's on my mind for like the future for sure. I know Stripe are the payment processor for most bootstrap founders. They're working on a Tailor still. But yeah, so we'll try and figure this out at some point.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, so I think you're absolutely right about building a community. It's not very fast, but so how long did it take you to first introduce the business model and actually ask people to pay for what you're doing? And second, how long did it take for you to become Ramen profitable? Is Ramen Club profitable?
Yeah, it is profitable. The only thing is because it's in London. If I lived like most other places, I would not need to do contracting on the side. But it's not quite London ramen profitable, but
Okay.
it will be quite soon. From our growth rates. But yeah, so your first question, how long to validate the kind of business model? Was that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, only about a month. So we got the idea that people wanted to kind of co-work together on Saturdays. And what I did was I created a landing page to see if anyone wanted to sign up with their email for this free event. And then I was like, okay, will anyone show up to this free event? Because I did a pre-test event to see what people thought. And yeah, we got like a full house. There was like 20 or 30 people who showed up. Then I sent out a survey basically saying, how much would you want to pay for this if we did it twice a month? And yeah, after that, I just sent out a link to everyone to see if anyone would pay. And lo and behold, people did. So I would call this as kind of like progressive validation. So like first, okay, will people give me their email? Will they show up? And will they pay eventually? And that's kind of how we did it.
Oh, that's really smart. I love the approach. And coming back to the question about content, I completely forgot about it. So you have lots of discounts and like different kinds of perks for the founders on the website. So how do you do that? How do you choose them, and how do you make sure you can introduce those to your community?
In terms of the discounts?
Yeah.
Well, there's two kind of approaches. One is like sometimes people ask for something and I see if I can like get it. Another is our members offer discounts for their own services. So that's just an easy way of getting them too. And finally, there are third-party services where you pay and they just have loads of discounts for your members.
Okay.
So that's the way we kind of use those three approaches overall. Yeah. But yeah, we try to keep them relevant to like tech founders. So a lot of what people need is fairly similar. Like most people like cloud credits like AWS or Google Cloud, for example, or tools like Airtable and Webflow. The most popular ones tend to be like the same ones over and over.
All right. And what is the biggest channel now for your customer acquisition? Is it still word of mouth from the events, or is it since you were virtual online, it moved there?
Yeah. Um, I wouldn't say there's like one that's by far the biggest, but I'd say it's a combination of one is it's a combination of Twitter,
Right.
Google search, and then like the indie biz meetups when I just meet
Hmm.
people, tell them about it, Ramen Club, and they try it out. So yeah, it's a kind of a mixture of those three things. I'm not quite sure which of these is like the best ROI yet. They're all like decent.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like maybe I should like pick one and just focus on that for like a couple of months. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mix of those three things.
Okay. And I saw your tweet actually about hitting 1,000 on your Indie London in the Slack. So
Yeah,
congrats on that.
thanks.
And well, obviously it's another community. It's a virtual community with, probably its rules and regulations and like making sure that, everyone's there, everyone's on track, and everyone's communicating basically, right? So how do you install this within the virtual community? How do you make sure you keep it alive?
To be honest, because the way that in the London says live, so we do the monthly events we do. Indie Beers is one of the meetups we do for that. Sorry if you can hear some like banging and
That's
stuff.
okay. Just
Um,
very lightly.
yeah, so yeah, so the in-person events that helps keep it alive for sure. Because not everyone, obviously, we don't get 1,000 people going to the pub because that would be crazy.
Right.
But usually like 60 or something like that. And yeah, so there's kind of like a good tight knit community of those sorts of people. Um, and I think it's important these to content's a really important part of communities to like keep people updated and also to like put people on a pedestal to like shout people out.
Right.
So we have a monthly newsletter where people in the Slack they share what they're building or their milestones or their wins. So we always shout those out on Twitter and our newsletter. Um, and yeah, we're just quite active on like Twitter and responding to people in the Slack and that sort of thing. And yeah, there's no like rocket science to it. It's just like over like a few years and just like consistent like we've never missed an event like except if like during COVID lockdowns.
Right.
Just doing that and never miss a newsletter like every time just doing that like eventually it just grows and it just becomes better and better over time. It's like most people talk about compound interest in finance, but it's just as true of communities as well. Like the relationships people build over time it just multiplies and it takes time. Like you can't like you can build a SaaS to 10k MRR in a few months if like, that is possible, but it's not possible to build a really strong community in a few months because human relationships, there's just like, you know, they're at their own pace and it just takes time sometimes.
Right. So consistency is key.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Also experimentation, like, getting feedback, seeing what's working, what isn't, and making adjustments. But yeah, persistence is really important for this kind of thing.
Have you ever had to make like a really important pivot or any kind of change because of the community, because they told you, something doesn't work for them, or, it's not really nice to have?
With to be honest, with Indie London, it's always been like quite simple. It's always been like quite small changes. Like, for example, a member suggested that we give out stickers with our logo on, so people
Hmm.
knew who was at the meetup for Indie Beers and who wasn't, because we don't hire the
Right.
venue. There's people there who are there for it and who aren't. So that's just like a little example of like a community like idea that we then like we do every time now. Another one is we did a community trip to Lisbon in March
Oh, wow.
this year with like 25 of us, and that was not my idea. That was the idea of one of our members, Saba, and yeah, his idea. And people were like, "Oh, this sounds really good." I was like, "Okay, fine, let's do it." And it's left to me to organize it mostly with some help from others. But yeah,
Right.
no, not every, you've got to listen to your community members as well. Like, you can't be the sole source of all ideas, I don't think.
Right. Oh, I love the stickers idea. We were actually just talking about it, but in terms of B2B businesses, like when you have somebody, some other business using your product, and they have this little sticker at the bottom of their page. So again, that creates a community, they support you and that you support them. So that's just, human version of it. So that's amazing. So what would be your best advice to those who think that, community is their way to grow, their way to go? How to start it, where to start, right? Do they have to approach, I don't know, people on the street? I don't know, start with their friends, or online is still the best choice they can make?
Yeah, so I think with communities, you just need to have a clear idea of at the beginning about like who it's for and what the purpose is of the community. Because without that, you're kind of lost. It's like, what are you actually doing? And there's a really good book that summarizes this well called Get Together by Bailey Richardson. It's a really great short book just on the kind of foundation aspects of community. But yeah, I think if you've got a clear idea of that, also make sure you're just the right person for it. Like, because if you're not passionate about the purpose and people in your community, and you're not one of those people, then it's just a lot harder for it to work out. And I question why you're doing it in the first place. But just making sure you're the right fit to do it is good. Like, when I started indie biz, I wouldn't actually describe myself as like a traditional indie hacker, because I'm not even like a developer. Most people are software engineers and stuff, but I was in like the tech world. I liked working on products, and I just made up for it with enthusiasm, because I was genuinely very passionate about the space and the people in it. And so I think you can make up for lack of experience with enough enthusiasm, and then you just learn enough to like make it up. So yeah, those are kind of basic things at the beginning. But I say also just like start small, like start off with just like a group chat of 10 people in like a Telegram or WhatsApp, and just get that really active before you kind of go too far, sort of thing. It's better to have a small, tight-knit, passionate community than like, a big, disparate, like, inactive one. Like, it's much better to have the former than the latter. But if also possible, like these days, people like are really kind of starving for in-person experiences. And that's not always possible if you're in different countries. There's different types. Some communities can only be online, and that's fine. But like consider doing an in-person meetup, because people do really love that. And there's a lot of meetups died during the COVID lockdowns and never came back.
Yeah.
People just never sort of brought them back. So, but there's a real like kind of need for that stuff. So definitely consider it. And I think my one tip, if you do a kind of in-person meetup, is just be very mindful of your environment for it, because it's kind of an irrational way our brains work. But let's say you're in a massive room and it feels that, but there's 100 of you, but it's a room that fits 1,000 people. The vibe's going to be quite weird.
Yeah.
But if you have 10 people in a busy tiny pub, the vibe's really good. So even though you've got like a tenth as many people, it feels better. So just be relative to how many people are coming, just choose the right environment for it, basically.
Right. So it's better to just start renting a smaller place just just to make sure you're not just wandering around. But
Yeah. And people also overdo it. Like sometimes people think they have to hire a big venue and get a sponsor and get drinks and get all this stuff. And like you don't need that stuff at the beginning. Like just go to like, bowling or to a bar, or like on a walk. Like you don't need to overcomplicate it at the start.
Perfect. Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love the approach. And it's great that you mentioned that you're also not a technical person, and having said that you have Slack, you have a website, you have a virtual community, may sound like you do have some kind of experience in tech. And a lot of founders think that this is an absolute necessity to like be tech fluent, know your software. Is it possible? Obviously it is, but how easy it is, or how difficult was it for you to, just build it all by yourself? Again, you don't have a co-founder.
Yeah, well, the stuff that I use for this is Slack, which doesn't require coding, Webflow, which is a no-code tool, and like
Oh no, Webflow is
Mailchimp.
so difficult. Oh, I
Yeah,
tried it.
but sometimes I get a freelancer to help do the difficult bits, to be fair. So yeah, I don't do everything myself necessarily, but the type of business I have, like, I don't need to write code, but I need to understand my audience. So the fact that I've worked in tech, in product management and UX research roles, means like I do actually understand the process of building tech products.
Right.
So that has like, I'm technical enough in that sense, but I don't write code, if that makes sense. But there's lots of other stuff to learn, even if you don't know code, just about the process of actually what it takes to build like software. Yeah, I mean, it's never been easier to create an online business without code. There's just more tools every day that remove the need for you to do it, and it's also becoming cheaper to find freelancers to build it for you as well. So there's less excuses than ever. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's definitely easier than it was 10 years ago, like much easier.
That's perfect. I think it's a very healthy approach. And, coming back to your previous comment on how you try to delegate, it's not always you, and you're trying to get as much help as possible. Do you think this is like a survival guide to a solo founder?
Yeah, possibly. Like, an important part of being a founder is being resourceful, and like knowing when to delegate and knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Like, I know that, I focus on the stuff that I'm good at, and I just try and outsource other stuff, or not do it, or try, or like, figure out how not to do it if it's not necessary. Yeah, and I think that's really important. Like, I think there's some founders who actually like doing everything, like they want to, even if it's at like the cost is that maybe they grow less fast or something, and that's fine. But people optimize for different things. But that's the beauty of being a bootstrap founder, is like, you can do things however you want. You can choose to do everything, even if it stunts your growth, kind of thing, because you might think, oh, I've got enough, but this is how I want to live my life. It just opens up options you couldn't have when you're venture backed. Again, nothing wrong with being venture backed. I'm just saying, in some ways it gives you more options with the money, but in other ways it limits your options in like how you can go about things.
Right. Okay. And just to sum it up, what what is the core for you of building a community? What should you not approach building a community without?
Yeah, I think just a real passion for the mission of your community and the sort of lives and missions of your members, and how they interact with each other. Like, I think you just need to really be obsessed with that kind of thing. Like, I spend like, all day every day immersed in the communities that I build or help build. And it just means, someone will ask a question and who to tag, because oh, they used to work here or built this before, so maybe they'll know that kind of thing. And unless you're really deeply into it, you're not going to be the best community builder you can be. So I think that kind of, either you need to have that passion, or you need to figure out how to fake having that passion, which I think is difficult.
Right.
Much easier to have it organically. So yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Charlie, so much. I think it's really important to talk about it, because a lot of people want to talk about communities and build communities and basically be supported, right? Especially as solo founders, right? So thank you for sharing your experience. I think it's amazing, and I'm super happy that you were here. So thanks for doing that, and yeah, hopefully we'll do it again someday.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to come back, and thanks so much for having me on. It's been great to chat.
Thank you, Charlie.